got a surf band based out of Milan, Italy this week on the show. The band is called Wave Electric, and they just released what they're calling, and this is the actual title, self-titled debut LP. The song is called Moon Surfing, and they gave us permission to play their song on this episode of the podcast devoted to the classic, and sometimes not so classic, genre cinema of yesteryear. I'm talking about Monster Kid Radio. Welcome to the show. My name is Derek M. Cook, your writer, host, and producer. And I'm excited this week because we're going to be talking about a movie that I really love. I love all the movies that we talk about here on the show, in one way or another. For the most part, I always find something to enjoy. But this is one that I've really enjoyed since the first time I saw it not too long ago. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. I'm talking about the 1931 film Dracula, but not the Dracula that you may know. We're talking about Dracula, the Spanish language version, or in Spanish, I can't pronounce my R, so I'm not going to try, but it's Dracula in Spanish. It was produced by Universal at night while the Todd Browning film was being produced during the day on the same set, same script, completely different cast and crew, completely different movie, but complimentary, and we're going to talk about that with friend of the show, Ricardo Deglado. Ricardo has been involved in the film industry for years. He's also an incredible artist, a phenomenal author, and, well, he's a monster kid. He's one of us. So we're going to talk about the 1931 Spanish language version of Dracula this week here on the show. Of course, it would not be an episode of Monster Kid Radio if we did not have Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review and Kenny's look at famous monsters of Filmland. And yes, Kenny, I know what's coming up next week on the show as well. I'll announce that at the very end. Anyway, before we get into the meat of the show, I just want to take a second to send a huge shout out. I don't know if anybody's listening from them or not, but a huge shout out to the Funhouse Lounge. This is a comedy club and lounge and performance space here in Portland, Oregon, over there on Southeast 11th Avenue, 2432 Southeast 11th Avenue in Portland, to be specific. You can find out more about them at funhouselounge.com. Why am I mentioning Funhouse Lounge? Well, the other day, Beth and I went to go see a show there. It was an improv comedy show called Comedy of Terrors. Their version of Comedy of Terrors. They took some Shakespearean stuff and they mixed in some classic monsters, and it was pretty darn cool. Now, when you think about going to an improv show, a lot of times these improv shows are driven by audience suggestions. There was just a little bit of an opportunity for some audience suggestions at the very beginning of the show, where they were asking for a classic monster. Yeah, they left that completely up to the audience, and this is what I really liked about it. This is what I thought was cool. So before I could say anything, somebody yelled out, "Mike Wazowski!" when somebody asked about a classic monster. Now, Mike Wazowski is a character from the Monsters, Inc. films from Disney, and that's cool and all, but is it a classic monster? Absolutely not. And I appreciated that the person kind of emceeing the event, hosting the event, running the thing, gently rejected that response and said we need something a little bit more classic monster. So of course I was able to shout out Creature from the Black Lagoon, and that's what they went with. But then somebody else tried to say Cujo, the Stephen King film. And again, I really appreciated that, despite the fact that the Cujo movie came out, my goodness, 30 plus years ago. When did that come out? It still wasn't quote-unquote classic horror compared to, well, what we consider classic horror in the Monster Kid community. And I think that's really cool and special, and I appreciate, and I am so grateful that we still live in an age in which just because somebody says classic, it doesn't necessarily mean old, but the classic horror cinema moniker or label or genre still refers to the kind of stuff that we talk about here on Monster Kid Radio. I don't know. Sometimes I get a little frustrated or sad or, I don't know, just down when I think about kids these days and their classic monster movies. All they think about is Friday the 13th and all this, the slashers. I don't know what that voice was. But I think the classic horror monsters, the Universal stuff in particular, as well as all the other stuff around it, they are deserving of iconic status and stature, even if their creators and their caretakers, Universal, I'm talking to you, don't know how to handle it or support them or treat them these days. They're still special. And it was just kind of heartwarming in a weird way to have this experience where these people who are younger than me are putting on an improv show and they recognize that Creature from the Black Lagoon is a classic movie monster. Cujo is not. Honestly, I've never seen the film, so I don't know. But still, Cujo is not. And I appreciated that. It was nice to see. How was the show? I had a grand time. It was a smaller audience. Beth was a little shocked by how few people were there, but it was also opening night, and, we still are in the pandemic/endemic. So, yeah, it was probably a good thing that it was not a full house. For us, anyway. I worry about the Funhouse Lounge and kind of money they brought in that night. But anyway, we all wore our masks. That was a requirement to get in. And it was a small cast of like 5 or 6 people. And what they did is they had, I think, the bare bones of a Shakespearean story. And they just kind of went for it and tried to work in elements from Creature from the Black Lagoon. After I said Creature, they asked for like 3 characteristics of Creature so that they could maybe kind of key into that a little bit more. And I talked about how he's a swimming monster, he's aquatic, really likes women in white bathing suits. And Beth threw out there that he is cunning and lays traps and is smart and calculating. And they told what I suppose could be a Shakespearean story. I don't know my Shakespeare well enough to know. But there are a lot of these and thous and verilies and things like that. And they turned it into this murder story that was taking place in a jungle and a lagoon. And I had such a grand time. Oh, so good. Improv performances like that don't necessarily lend themselves to repeat performances, and rightly so. Part of the magic of improv is the spontaneity and that sort of thing, right? So I'm curious as to how the show would play again with a different monster, or maybe even with the same monster. And if I decided to, I could probably go see it again because it's still showing, and that's ultimately why I'm bringing it up now. It's playing through September 2nd, again at the Funhouse Lounge. I'm going to put a link to the Comedy of Terror's Facebook event page in the show notes. If you're in the area, I recommend it. Check it out and let them know that Monster Kid Radio sent you. All right, let's get into the bulk of the show. Let's go ahead and get into all of this. I'm excited to talk about Dracula with Ricardo, and oh man.
I am Dr. Lee Cushing. Welcome to my Chamber of Horrors.
Dr. Cushing's Chamber of Horrors is a monster rally novel in the tradition of the classic Universal and Hammer horror film. It's written by Stephen D. Sullivan, the award-winning author of White Zombie, Daikaiju Attack, Manos: The Hands of Fate, and one of the creators of the original Chill role-playing game.
This book recreates the thrills of the classic monster versus monster film. We've got vampires, werewolves, mummies, psychic twins, scheming madmen, and plenty of unexpected chills.
Now you can get Dr. Cushing's Chamber of Horrors in print, or for Kindle at Amazon.com and other fine retailers. Coming soon in other ebook formats. Find out more at CushingHorrors.com or SDSullivan.com, and support Steve's work through Patreon at HeySteve.com.
I do hope you've enjoyed your visit. Please come again, and remember, the chamber is always waiting for its next victim.
Sweeps London from end to end. Even Scotland Yard is baffled. But 2 men of intrepid daring fight back. It's Abbott and Costello at their hilarious best. Battling fiction's most fearsome fiends in Bud Abbott and Lou Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Co-starring Boris Karloff as Robert Louis Stevenson's fabulous Double Demon.
The hide will kill him. The hide will kill him.
With Helen Weston, Craig Stevens, and Reginald Denny.
Hey, stop this fight! There's ladies present!
Bud and Lou are tearing up the town, trapping the beast among a bevy of beauties, adding turmoil to terror in a house of horrors that would frighten even Frankenstein.
Come on, Will! We can catch your monster! Give me a hand!
And what a riot when they get funny notions from deadly potions.
Hey, Slim.
What?
Those guys must be seeing things.
Pay no attention to them, they're drunk. You know, there's always a way of...
Vicky!
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Episode 30 of Ultra 7 is entitled Glory for Whom? It's a question that each member of the Ultra Guard must answer for themselves. The question is provoked by the appearance of new recruit Aoki, who demonstrates great skill, but whose drive to succeed pits him against his own team. His aggressive pursuit of acclaim is of concern first to Furuhashi, who accompanies Aoki on a training flight and watches in horror as the young man tries to take out Dan's plane. Chalking it up to overconfidence, Captain Kiriyama assigns Dan to partner with Aoki on an investigation. But the recruit's ambition gets the better of him, and he recklessly fires on a mysterious tank, leading to another confrontation with Dan. Things really come to a head when a training exercise involving the magma riser takes a deadly turn. Enabled by Aoki's tampering, an opportunistic alien interferes, and the mock combat becomes a real battle. Ultra 7 begins a grueling duel with alien Platic, while Aoki learns that service in the Ultra Guard requires more than individual talent. But he pays a high price to gain this knowledge. Glory for Whom is a memorable mid-series meditation on the contrast between heroism and hubris, and as the story shows, there can be a fine line between the two. After all, the Ultra Guard is an elite squad, its members possessing specialized skills which must be employed with excellence. This has to be balanced with humility and teamwork, exemplified by Dan Moriboshi, and his pairing with Aoki points out the distinctions in attitude between them. Episode 30 could have been an all-time classic were it not for an unfortunately goofy-looking villain whose toughness is undermined by the fact that it looks like he's wearing a coat made out of plastic bags. As it is, the standout element is the character of Aoki, played by Takehisa Yamaguchi, who seems tragically trapped by his self-aggrandizing nature. Yamaguchi is a charismatic presence on screen, so it's not surprising that in 1973 he would go on to star as Riderman Joji Yuki in Kamen Rider V3, sharing the screen with Akiji Kobayashi, also known as Ultraman's Captain Muramatsu. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Those hysterical, hilarious horrors when you join those Bowery boys as overnight guests in a mansion of merry maniacs.
We just want your heads.
Well, if you said that in a... Our heads?
Uncle Anton, the scientific stoop.
Would you like a high cut or a low cut, sir?
Oh, I'd like a low cut.
Uncle Derek, the medical madman.
What is it you're trying to say?
Help!
Cousin Francine, the fluff with the stuff.
I mean business.
Aunt Amelia, who's no camellia. The butler Grisson, he's gruesome. The family tree, a man-eating honeysuckle.
Boy, I feel just like a space cadet. This will register his brain potential.
My friend here has a vacuum-packed head.
The Bowery boys get the heebies, the jeebies, the willies, and the shakes, while you get the laughs of the year.
Gentlemen, I have a suggestion. 50-50.
No.
Routine 6, Satch.
It's coming. The world's craziest fun and fright show, the Lemon Grove Kids Meet the Monster. It's so scary, so crazy, we dare you to see it. We dare you to see the Lemon Grove Kids Meet the Monsters. The screen's funniest and wildest teenagers in the craziest fun and fright show you've ever seen. We'll see weird and frightening movie monsters, not only on the screen, but in the audience, alive and in person. See the horrifying mad mummy come to life and go into the audience to get you. We warn you, don't come if you're chicken. This show is not for sissies. If you're not afraid, be sure to see the world's craziest fun and fright show, the Lemon Grove Kids Meet the Monster. 1,001 laughs, thrills, and chills. In widescreen and Eastman color.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at famous monsters of Filmland. Today we are talking about the 1931 Spanish version of Dracula. It was mentioned briefly in a giant 2-part article on Dracula 1931 and its sequels. They appeared in FM 22 and 23 from April and June of 1963. They were reprinted numerous times throughout the run of FM. The 2 articles spanned 32 pages and included a whopping 59 pictures. In FM 22, after history and facts about the Lugosi version, this promise was made. 8 weeks from now, in issue 23, we'll be back with another 16 pages or more on the Mexican version of Dracula made in 1931. The coverage found in FM 23 was limited to a series of photos. There was no write-up on the film and its history. The first picture is from the scene when Van Helsing confronts Renfield in the asylum. A famous scene between Renfield and Van Helsing recreated in the early Spanish version. Next up is a picture of Carlos Villar standing in the garden, staring intently. Conde, Count Dracula, Transylvanian with a Spanish accent. A picture of Drac pouncing on a sleeping victim follows. Carlos Villar in his interpretation of a classic moment of terror in Dracula, Spanish 1931 version. Then we see a closer shot with the vampire preparing to bite that same victim. In another second, the 2 small pinpoint pricks on the sleeper's throat, the calling card of Count Dracula, Villar. And finally, a shot of the Count choking Renfield on the stairs. Spanish Renfield is introduced to old Castilian custom in the castle of the man in the custom-made costume. That is all for this week's look at famous monsters of Filmland. We will have more next week. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
Nightmare terror from the tomb. An ancient curse comes to life to strangle the living and raise the dead. the horror and the terror of a story that began in ancient Egypt.
Take Catobe! Take him!
When Ka-Tubey, a son of Pharaoh, died in the desert and was covered in the shroud that bore the sacred power of life and death.
What was he saying?
He says that death awaits all who disturb the resting place of Ka-Tubey.
Warning to every creature of flesh and blood. Beware the beat of the cloth-wrapped feet. Beware the curse of the mummy's shroud. This is the leader of the British expedition who came in search of the tomb. The rich and ruthless financier who believes money can bribe even the devil himself. This is the son who knows there is no escape.
Someone or something is trying to destroy us. I believe it'll find us wherever we go.
The wife and mother trapped by the mummy's shroud.
I see death.
This is Haiti, the crystal gazer, who sees into the past and the terrifying future. This is the girl who's doomed, cursed by the mummy's shroud.
You mean I'm going to die?
In a few minutes from now.
Kill her! Kill her!
Dead 1,000 years, now he lives and breathes to avenge an ancient curse, to strangle the living, praise the dead, and prey upon human flesh.
What's that noise?
I don't know.
Spiders. I told them to bring me one, and I'd believe it. I can't say I blame you, Sheriff. But Flynn is still missing.
Deep into caverns whose very air is putrefied by the stench of death. They search ceaselessly for a missing man, or possibly a giant spider no one really believes exists, except the high school teacher who knows his science and his students.
There'll be more giant spiders coming into the world. They may even be hatching from their eggs in some remote spot right now. Do you realize how easy it would be for them to overcome us humans?
A horrifying spectacle. Its existence shocks and fascinates the world of science. Its gigantic claws capable of crushing a man or tearing a woman apart as if she were a fly. But nothing sends the cats like the presence of out-of-this-world horror. A heart-stopping experience that defies man's imagination, that shrinks every woman's skin with the tension of terrifying withdrawal, as if 1,000 spiders were taking possession of her body. You'll never believe it until you see it. You'll never forget the touch of the spider.
This is Count Vlad, but you may recognize me by my more familiar name, Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. In your parlance, you might call these revelations spoilers. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned, and don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
Listeners, I'm just going to say right off the bat, no disrespect whatsoever for the Bela Lugosi classic film. But there's a lot about the Spanish language version of Dracula that's really, really good, and dare I say, even better than what Todd Browning put on screen. And we're going to talk about that. And we're just going to catch up with somebody who hasn't been on the show in a while, Ricardo Deglado. Welcome back to Matzke Radio, sir.
Thank you, Dee. I'm certainly happy to be here and happy to talk about things that bump in the night. And I thought you summed it up really, really well, that, no disrespect at all intended to the Lugosi, Todd Browning Dracula, which we all adore and take into our darkened hearts. But we're talking about essentially a companion piece today. And I, deeply fascinated by that journey. And when you asked me if I wanted to do it, I leaped at it. Yes. So.
To be fair, you and I have a list of like 3 or 4 different things that we want to talk about that we keep saying, let's do this, let's do that. And then I never follow up with it. So thank you for doing this one at least. And we'll definitely have you back on in the near future to do the others. But right now, this movie, it's a treat. And I want to talk about it, but I want to catch up with you too. Last year, you came out with an incredible book about Dracula. Dracula of Transylvania came out in November of last year. It's still available for sale. This is a fantastic
Thank you, Derek. I mean, I'm really pleased with the way it came out. I'm pleased that it was received really well. It was a labor of love for many reasons, and the English version of the film that we're going to talk about today is one of them. I grew up adoring the Universal monsters, but I think it was, as we've discussed before, Dracula was the one Universal monster that was like, you know what, I'm kind of a jerk and I'm okay with it. The Frankenstein monster's like, look, I'm just a victim of circumstance, actually various circumstances here, and Larry Talbot's like, hey, I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and the Gill Man's like, look, I'm just a fish here, leave me alone. But Dracula was the one that was like, hey, leave the window open and no wolfsbane, please, so I can come in and drain the life out of you, because that's what I do. And I wanted to write an illustrative version of Dracula that kind of reflected all my different favorite Draculas, because they're all my favorites. And I was pleased with the way it came out. And so Clover was so happy with it that they decided to release later this year an Art of Dracula of Transylvania. And it'll be Clover only puts about 20 to 30 illustrations in the original novel. There's actually over 150 images that this book will feature, and I've actually gone through and painstakingly, written blurbs, quotes, anecdotes about each of the creations of the pieces of concept art that I created for the book. And to refresh everyone's memory a little bit, I've been a working concept artist in Hollywood, for the last 25 to 30 years, and I've just gotten to the point where I wanted to tell my own story. So I mostly teach now, and Dracula of Transylvania is one of the first books out. But I love the idea of illustrating my stories with concept art, and this forthcoming Art of Dracula of Transylvania will feature all that. And find me on social media, and we will have links to get you to that book when it comes out. So I'm excited.
I am looking forward to it. I'm a fan of your artwork. I mean, we're friends,
we are.
But I'm
Thank
also
you.
a fan. Yeah, a fan of your artwork and a fan of what you've done. And when we first started connecting, and I realized, dude, you worked on Star Trek. Dude, you did all this cool stuff. And now I get to call this guy who worked on the stuff that I love a friend. How cool is that? And I get to continue to support him through even more content. Your version of Dracula, it is epic. The original story is great. Bram Stoker's Dracula is a classic for a reason. There's a reason why it inspired so much and spawned so much. But it's also one of the stories that I feel like a lot of people have tried to put a different spin on, or have kind of told their own version of it. And what you did with it is really, incorporated not just the Stoker original, but all these different flavors and influences, and just made this huge epic story, and it's fantastic. So listeners, please check it out. Please check it out. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes.
Thank you. My pitch to Clover was, The Exorcist meets Lord of the Rings, and that's exactly that's exactly what it turned out to be. But my Dracula is the malevolent Dracula. He is Christopher Lee. He is the Tomb of Dracula. He's the no fooling around Dracula, and he just takes no prisoners. And there's this whole supernatural world that kind of surrounds him, either in a way that is serving him or is trying to assassinate him. It's pretty cool. I'm very proud of it. I'm very humble about it. Yes.
It's a really good way to put it, and a really great way to sum it up. And I'm looking forward to the art book.
Man.
Looking forward to it. And that's when did you say when that's coming out?
It should be out in December. They're going to do
okay.
Clover will announce a Kickstarter early in the fall. It is more than anything else kind of a labor of love, and I talk about a piece of art, but also in that piece of art I talk about what inspired me, and we've talked a little bit about it. When I was a kid, I spent part of my childhood in Costa Rica. Dark Shadows was not called Dark Shadows to me. It was called Sombras Tenebrosas. And all the characters spoke in Spanish. And so I never, as a kid, saw Dark Shadows in English until, Tubi came out, which is pretty cool. So you can kind of go through it. But it was just kind of analogous to the Universal Monster movies for me. I love Dark Shadows as a kid. So all that.
Dark Shadows is good. Dark Shadow, I'm a huge fan. And, to sidetrack listeners, if you're not listening to Penny Dreadful's Terror at Collinwood podcast, you are missing out, because she really gets into some Dark Shadows goodness, but that's besides.
Well, that's true. And then in addition, I had an uncle that kind of realized I loved all things undead, and so he took me in no short order to watch the Christopher Lee Draculas in Spanish, and then El Santo contra las Mujeres Vampiros as well, which I was like, okay, El Santo's cool, but these vampire women are even cooler. And so it was just a really good time for me to see, and absorb Nosferatu in another language. And that's why in my novel, forgive me for tying it back to my silly stuff, but that's why in my novel,
please,
my vampires speak different languages, and I wrote it into the story, and, I annotated in English afterward, but it's just a lot of fun. But that's just, when you're a kid and, Peter Cushing runs along the table and you're like, what's he doing? He's going to jump and he's going to pull these curtains. Oh my God, he's pouring sunlight down on Dracula's leg. That's some pretty cool stuff. That was like, it really impressed me, made an impression upon me. Yeah. And then later on, I would see them in English, right, back in the States. And, it impacted me. I mean, Brides of Dracula, he turns the windmill to form a cross. Oh my God,
Isn't that the coolest?
I mean, those two are probably, there's the whole Death Star thing as well, but those two are among the coolest endings I think I've ever seen in a movie. Like, holy smokes. No fooling around. Yeah.
That is one of my favorite moments in any vampire film is the climax of Brides of Dracula. I love that, and I will go to bat for that film just because of that.
I have I'm looking at the Blu-ray right over my shoulder here in the whole vampire section of my DVD and Blu-ray collection. I love that one. So good, highly recommended.
Oh, it's so good.
And it's they're just terrific parables that just really deeply impressed me, and in the end made me want to tell my own story 25, 30 years later. So there we go.
I love that about being a monster kid, loving this stuff, that it drives so many of us to want to tell our own stories in that world with that flavor, with that feeling, that vibe. Whether it's somebody like you who's writing and he's been an artist and now you're teaching and everything else, or Steve Sullivan, who's an author, or the various filmmakers I've had on here like Chris Pym or Josh Kennedy, or even what I do. I love that these monsters, they're supposed to be scary, but they also kind of welcome us in and want us to be part of that world. And I love that so much about this particular genre.
Well,
that we
I
play
mean,
in
the concept art classes that I teach, we talk a lot about world building, and the universal monster universe, if you will, is just this deep example of world building. It just sucked me in as a kid, and so I got really picky as a little boy, and I said, okay, if they don't turn into bats, they're not vampires, right? And I really religiously, quite strangely, held on to that. And then this TV movie called Salem's Lot came along, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to have to revise that. And so, but it was fascinating. It's fascinating for me as an older guy now to think back on sort of the scrutiny that I would place upon, the Universal Monster Lexicon. It's only because I loved it so much. It really meant a lot to me, and Don Glut and Gary Rhodes, two Dracula scholars, they are writing the intros to The Art of Dracula of Transylvania, and Don has this great saying, says, look, if you can't outrun the mummy, you deserve to die. And I've always thought that was just completely hilarious as a kid who, you know what, I kind of know that the Mummy is better than the Mummy sequels, but there's a hell of a lot of Mummy in the Mummy sequels. I love them. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
You can get me going on Mummy movies.
I know, and
for days.
I know, I would start to fill in the gaps of movies that should have been made, like the Return of the Bride of Frankenstein, or the Wolfman versus Dracula. I all that stuff. I would,
man.
And I would think, that's the thing that, that's the stuff that made me, so interested in it. But it was all about the love, and in the end, I will say that as much as I love Edward Van Sloan and I enjoy Eduardo Rosamena in this movie we're going to talk about, it's all about Peter Cushing. I gotta be honest. Like, he kind of by nose is Van Helsing for me. Like, he was just so cool back then, and and also he's kind of a very tender character in terms of how he dealt with people who he needed to help, and I saw that a little bit more, but still a lot of fun.
Indeed. Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, I was worried about this, but I'm also thrilled about this. We're going to talk about Spanish Dracula, and here we are, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in, and we've talked about Peter Cushing, the Mummy sequels, all this, and I love it. That's one of my favorite things about this podcast is that, sure, we might get together to talk about one thing, but again, these monsters just want to open their arms and bring us in and start chatting. Oh, man. I have got goosebumps right now just thinking about, again, I'm still stuck on the Brides of Dracula thing, but then you mentioned the mummies. I'm like, oh, you're speaking my language. So yeah.
Well, I would say that a good entry for this discussion is the idea that I would put out there to anyone listening is to watch these two movies, the Browning and Meford version, back to back. Like, I really recommend that. And I would watch that with an open Monster Kid heart and just kind of say, look, I adore Bella, or I have faults with Bella's film, however you feel about it, but enjoy that, and then watch the Meford film. Like, George Meford was a guy that didn't speak Spanish. He had an interpreter on the set, and as we all know, according to the lore of this story, the cast filmed at night, while the Browning cast filmed during the day, during the same sets. And it's a great exercise as someone who teaches a storyboarding class to see, to realize that apparently Meford would watch the dailies of the Browning film shooting from the day before. So he was almost like, and we use a sports term on a Monster Kid show, he was like the Monday morning quarterback. He could see what Todd Browning had done earlier that day or the day before, and he could say, you know what, I want to do that, or I don't want to do that. And so it's, again, I would watch the Browning film first and see it and enjoy it. And the best example of that is the magnificent, opening 20 minutes of the Lugosi film in Transylvania, and then, watching the first 20 minutes of the Spanish language version and just seeing there's more camera movement in the Meford version. You know, the photography, especially in Renfield's chamber, is pretty crisp. You see differences in the decision-making of the directors. In the Lugosi version, it appears that Dracula is the one that bites Renfield, and in the Meford version, it is very clearly that the brides overcome Renfield.
Yeah.
You know, and then kind of moving forward, let me kind of move back. There's just the way that the brides are introduced. There's a great shot in the Meford version where you're outside the window and you're looking past Renfield, who's kind of looking around outside. He's been drugged and he's trying to get fresh air. And behind him, you could see the brides kind of lurking and ready to pounce. And that's what you do if you're Meford and you've seen the coverage that perhaps Browning has done the day before, and you go, you know, I want to introduce the brides in a different way. I'm gonna do it like this, because if you look clearly at the Browning version, the brides come in from the left side. They come in from the inside. So it's just really beautiful thing to see that contrast and the different ways that the same, you know, story solutions were kind of brought toward, you know.
So you said something a second ago, and I wanted to jump on that. When you recommend people watch this back to back, and that's how I saw this film for the first time. I'd known the story. I'd known about Spanish language Dracula. I'd owned it. It gets included in a lot of special features in Dracula DVD on Blu-ray or on Blu-ray. But I just never sat down to watch it, you know, because I love my Bela Lugosi, so that's what I watched. A few years ago, I can't remember when it was. I was trying to look it up here and I can't find it, but several years ago, Fathom Events did a screening with Turner Classic Movies, and they showed both Draculas back to back as a double feature. And that's how I watched it, is I watched the Lugosi film, and I loved it. And then about a third of the theater left during the intermission in between, which, I mean...
Interesting.
I don't know what they were thinking, because we got to see the Spanish language Dracula right after that, and it was amazing to see it that way on the big screen. There are details in the Spanish language version of the film that highlighted things that I didn't notice in the English language version of the film. So, I mean, they are such a complimentary package, and I think it's a great way to see these movies, or to see this movie for the first time, to see it as a back-to-back experience. It's so good. There's even like a fan edit out there somewhere that somebody put together. A cut of, what they did is they took the Lugosi Dracula and kind of recut it to kind of match some of the pacing from the Spanish language version. I've never watched it. I've heard about it, and every time I go to try to find it, I can't find it online, but I've heard about it, and I'd like to watch it just to kind of see how that works, because
I agree.
Lugosi
is the man.
Know? I mean, I love Lugosi, but there's so much more dynamic stuff happening in the Spanish language.
There is, and if you sit down and Monster Kids, everyone listening to this, if you do have a cut, please send it to Derek and I. We're both on Facebook. You can track us down. You know, we love to see it, but you know, very definitely there's a different sensibility going on. Even though they're shooting from the same script on the same sets, like there's 3 shots of the spider. There's the traditional spider crawling up the wall in the Lugosi version. There's actually 3 shots of the spider in the Meford version. You know, and yes, Lugosi is the archetype Dracula. When you watch them back to back, you get that sense. They're the decision of Todd Browning to illuminate the eyes of Lugosi is, in my opinion, one of the great decisions in film history, because they don't do that really in the Villarreal version. There's some pretty strong close-ups of his eyes, and they look very, you know, Christopher Lee-like, honestly, if we're going to be, you know, specific about it. But, you know, Lugosi is very regal, and he's very elegant, and, you know, really exudes confidence and the sort of royalty, whereas Villarreal is a little bit more brusque. You know, he's confident in a different way. And I think that the Villarreal performance is a little bit more based on silent film acting, whereas Lugosi, we have to remember this, Lugosi had the benefit of doing this role on stage many, many, many times, right? So he was accustomed, he was already comfortable in his Dracula shoes, and he kind of knew what he wanted to do, and it's terrific. It's terrific. It's a towering performance by Lugosi, and anyone else, Villarreal is like the George Lazenby of Dracula. And I have you. The irony that I'm going to say to that is that On Her Majesty's Secret Service is, in my opinion, one of the best Bond films ever made. And
I agree. I love
love
that
it
film.
too. And as much as everyone loves Sean Connery, like everyone loves Bela Lugosi, Villarreal is pretty good. I will notice that Bela wears his crest, the royal sort of emblem, in the first scene, and then when he's in England, he doesn't, if I remember correctly. And I don't think Villarreal wears it at all in the picture. I don't think he wears it at all. So, just kind of an interesting contrast. And then also, there's the infamous cardboard in Mina's bedroom that is in the Lugosi version, but is not in the Villarreal version, which I think is really interesting, because it's a complete directorial decision in terms of like, I've seen the footage, and what's that cardboard doing there on that lampshade? Well, then you make a decision as director Meford whether you're going to do that or not, and he chooses not to do it. Just thought that was really, really, really interesting. Yeah.
Listeners, there's a scene in the Lugosi film that we're referring to, and it might have been the Cinemassacre YouTube channel. One of these other YouTubers did a really in-depth breakdown of that scene. I'll try to find the link to that YouTube video and include it in the show notes. It's weirdly, it's a weird thing, I guess, in retrospect, kind of looking at it now, not really understanding what was going on, but it clearly was a choice because it doesn't appear in the Meford film.
Clearly a choice. And they were shooting, so closely together, morning and evening, that you have to really decide whether you're going to include that in the shot or not, right? And in the scene or not. And so it's really, it's really fascinating. The other thing that's fascinating as a person who speaks Spanish is to realize that Lupita Tovar, Carlos Villarreal, the whole cast, they spoke Spanish, but they were all from different parts of Latin America, like Villarreal and Pablo Alvarez Rubio, who's a terrific Renfield, in my opinion. Is he Dwight Fry? No, but he's a terrific Renfield. He's great. He's great. Those two guys are Spaniards, and Barry Norton is Argentinian, and so Lupita Tovar, Carmen Guerrero, they are Mexican-born actresses, and the accent and the dialect are slightly different, and it's kind of, for me, it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's really interesting. So, but yeah. Pablo Alvarez Rubio is pretty cool, and he and Dwight Fry have the same memorable scenes together. Dwight has the sort of memorable, in my opinion, reaction of, I've never heard that name before, and the way he trembles as he controls himself. It's just, in my thought, just towering acting, by Mr. Fry. And Barry Norton and David Manners, their Harkers are pretty straightforward. We don't need to go over that anymore. Certainly that's the lore of Jonathan Harker, but Rubio and Dwight Fry kind of steal part of that middle part of the show as Renfield for me. Just a lot of fun.
And one of the most iconic shots of all of classic Universal Monsters is that shot looking down the stepladder at Renfield as he's looking up, and he's got that grin. It's just an eerie image. I love that with Dwight Fry doing that. It's phenomenal. What Rubio does with Renfield, he plays him a little less, I don't know.
A little less, in my opinion, less intentionally scary. He plays him a little bit more insane, whereas for me, Dwight Fry is like, look, I'm all in, dude. I'm all in, master. I'm going to do whatever you want. Whereas Pablo just kind of plays it like Dracula and the Bride has just driven me insane, and I I can't really recover from that. Before we go any further, I have to say that in the Lugosi version, he says, "I bid you welcome," but in the Villarreal version, he does not say that, which I thought was kind of...
No, there's a few things that... Some iconic lines, some iconic moments from the Lugosi film that do not appear in the Meford version of the film. And again, these are choices that I find fascinating. I don't know anything about George Meford as a director, as an artist, as a creator. I know nothing about him. I know a little bit more about Todd Browning and where he came from. But Meford, I know nothing about. So I can't even imagine where some of the choices came from. But they work. In a different way. I don't know if they're better or worse in some cases, but they just work in a different way.
You go, whoa, when you see stuff that goes on throughout the show. The food is uncovered in the Meford version in Renfield's bedroom, and it is covered in the Lugosi version. There's the 2 stock shots of the Demeter out in the ocean that are in the Browning version, and they are not in the Meford version, and the way that contrast Renfield in both of those films on the Demeter in both versions is really cool. Rubio is backlit and he's just cackling maniacally, and the Lugosi Dracula is so cool. He stands out in a storm and doesn't get wet because he's just so darn cool, Yes. And yet Carlos Villarreal, there's shots of the crew looking at him, and he's got this animalistic scowl that's just like, okay, that's again the whole, he's not Sean Connery, but he's a different guy, and it's still pretty cool. I just really appreciated seeing that contrast. It's like Monster Kid Film School essentially when you watch both of these back to back. It
really is. And I know that the Browning version gets a lot of criticism, I guess. I don't know if that's quite the right word. That might be too strong a word, but it is a little stagey. It is a little creaky. Yeah, it's a little stagey. And, it's clear that Todd Browning came from the silent film school, and I'm sort of Meford, but Browning just seems like afraid to move the camera around or do too much with like background or whatever. Whereas Meford seems totally at ease moving the camera around, and where he places the camera, there are shots at the beginning of the film when Renfield is coming into town. In the Browning film, he has like a conversation with just like one guy. There's nobody else in the background. There might be a building, and that's it. You don't get the impression that this is a village that he came to, but maybe it's just another set piece. In the Meford film, there's life happening behind him. There's extras in the background. There's stuff happening. Meford had no problem moving the camera just a little bit to include all of this. And I think, like you just said, it's great Monster Kid Film School to kind of see the different techniques and the different emotions you're able to get based on where you just place the camera. Something as simple as
for
that.
example, in the scene that you're discussing, director Meford decides to do a 180, and you see the crowd, and behind them you could see the edge of the inn, but behind the edge of the inn you see the facades of the buildings in essentially the European street town at Universal at that point of the development of the studio. And it's literally half a house. It's like you get to the top of the pitch and you just cut that thing in half, and it's meant to be filmed from a direct angle so you don't see that it's half a house, but it's there. And, it's cool. I get the analysis, and I get the, hey, that middle part is a bit stage bound, but it's based on a stage play. And there was stuff that they couldn't do. I believe that Lupita Tovar is the only person in those 2 movies that actually you see bite someone in the neck. You see the bite marks actually in the Meford version. You don't see actual bite marks in the Browning version. So it's just a wonderful thing to compare and contrast and analyze. It's terrific stuff, and it's almost like an expansion of the vocabulary. What a wonderful thing if there was a Spanish language version of Frankenstein, right? Or Bride of Frankenstein, man. So you could see, somebody else is, this watching the rushes of the previous day and say, you know what, I want to do something a little bit different, and pay it off in a different way, and and we get to enjoy it in a different way. And I think I was reading today, and I don't know how much I'm revealing here. That apparently Villarreal wore a toupee, and apparently it was the one with the widow's peak that Lugosi himself wore. And I haven't double checked that as complete fact, but that certainly raised my eyebrows when I read that. So it certainly makes sense that everything was shared and compared. And it was really cool to sort of go through that journey, once, and then see that second film and just go, oh my goodness, that scene was shot completely different. There's still that beautiful narration over the discovery of the boats, and everything is in shadow because you can't show it, And hey, if there's one thing you learn from the Villarreal version, there's armadillos in Transylvania, and there's no It's somehow apropos to a Spanish language Dracula film. A potato bug as well, and it's pretty cool because the possum in the Villarreal version, maybe it had a little bit too much to drink before the shoot, because he just steps off one of the coffins and just falls out of shot. And the Lugosi possum is a little bit more active. But I say that because for maybe some of our younger Monster Kid radio fans, you couldn't show actual rats on screen back then. That was a really serious breach of censorship, and it's just terrific to see all that. I loved the decision of director Meford to put a light inside Dracula's coffin, so when he opens it up, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's so cool. The light pops up, the fog comes up, and he just rises up. It's just it's really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it's a different way of rising too. I don't know. Again, it had to have been a choice. I don't think it was accidental. But the way he comes up, he stands almost as if he was coming up from a crouch, which I know is not how you lie in a coffin. But it changes the body in a way. It's a much more menacing rising from the coffin.
It is, and that's what I mean in the sense that I'm going to use the word feral, but maybe the Villarreal version is a little bit more feral, and like, I'm a little scarier than this guy, but Lugosi is the king of the vampires, right? Like, that's kind of difference, perhaps.
Sure.
And I just thought that was terrific. And the lighting thing was a deliberate choice, because you see it later on in the story where he wakes up in Carfax Abbey, and he climbs out of the coffin. Even the little things where the brides in the Browning version are a little bit more formal, and they sort of have their hand. They're creepy as all get out. Like, don't I'm not being confused here, but when you cut to the close-up of the brides in the Meford version, there's the lighting on them and the way that they are grimacing is pretty scary. It's pretty scary. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No argument here. I agree with you 100%. The way he fills the screen, the way Dracula fills the screen, whenever we cut to like a close-up of Dracula, and I keep going back to the beginning of the film because I feel like that's where it was strongest, the differences were strongest for me, because eventually I was able to let go and just kind of enjoy the rest of the film. Where at the beginning of the movie, when Dracula comes up on the stagecoach, and it's Lugosi, and we get the close-up of his face and the hat and, the eyes being lit up or whatever. The way that is shot, he's like dead center in the screen. There's some negative space on either side of him, and our eyes, because of the negative space, are forced to kind of travel into what Lugosi's doing. When the Meford Dracula, and I can't roll my R's, so I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, but Carlos
Villarreal.
The Villarreal. Okay, there we go. Villarreal's Dracula. His face fills the screen. It's right there. It is, again, you said feral. I think that's a great way to put it. His face just fills the screen, and you are forced to confront him in a way that you've lost even just a little bit of control. And I love that about this movie.
It's true. And, there's, as soon as I saw those really strong close-ups of the Villarreal's eyes, I immediately thought of the bloodshot Christopher Lee eyes, like right away, and I don't know who saw what or whatever. I'm big, honestly, I'm more of a sunny side of the street guy, and so I always look at it like two of the same ideas happening, in two different places of the world, and that it's really startling, really kind of drawn into the Villarreal Dracula, and again, maybe it just really maybe that was just Melford's way of saying, you know what, this Browning guy seems to create a slit of light over the Lugosi character, the Lugosi Dracula. What am I going to do? Well, maybe I'll do these really bloodshot close-ups, and they work. They work. And yeah,
they really do.
No,
they
and
really
then there's extra shots of Castle Dracula as you go in toward the castle with before and then after you pick up Renfield. So it's kind of a neat thing to see a few extra shots of the castle as you're being introduced to the story. I mean, I think the last time we talked about Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. I talked about how that opening in the cemetery is one of my favorite scenes in the Universal Monster Lexicon.
Oh, yeah.
But the first 20 minutes of Dracula, I mean, that's just one big, adventure. It's just really cool. The whole story is explained to you. In the world of 1931 that may or may not have known what a vampire is, exactly who the undead are, what they do, what their purpose is. Who Dracula is. The deeper that our poor Renfield, who is us, essentially, Renfield introduces us to this macabre world. It's just really a great exercise in storytelling. There's a reason it's so highly thought of, and that brings the analysis of the second two acts of the movies we're discussing today to the fore. Okay, I get that, but man, just really incredible stuff in my opinion. They put the Skull Island stuff first in this movie. Let's put it that way.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Once we get past all of that and we get to Van Helsing and Renfield and Juan Harker and all the other stuff going on, even that feels more dynamic because there seems to be more motion going on with the Browning film. It would make a great stage play, and it was based on the stage play, so of course it would make a great stage play. I feel like Melford saw that and it's like, makes a great stage play, but this is a film, so let's move things around. Let's get things moving a little bit more. We have control over what the audience can see because we've got a film camera. We can point it where we want people to look. We don't have to shoot it this way.
And he uses it very cleverly where he has the characters moving closer or away from each other, which in turn motivates the camera to push in or pull back into a wider shot. And it's just, it's terrific stuff. And again, Mr. Melford had the advantage of seeing the dailies of Mr. Browning's film, and we'll never know whether Browning saw the rushes for the Melford stuff and said, "Why didn't I do that?" But it's terrific stuff. The cigarette case bashing scene is really interesting to contrast with each other as well. It's I think that you're right that Melford was like, look, we gotta find some visual interest here, and I believe some of the scenes with Renfield that were shot inside the sanitarium are shot on the balcony in the Melford version, and so you kind of get that different sense. And then the Renfield creeping up on the fainted nurse is staged completely differently, and it's that's scary. It's really scary. It's so much fun, and yet you still. And, sort of taking a step sideways here, where, we have, in my opinion, the great character of Martin. He just runs the place, and doggone it, this Renfield guy keeps getting out of his cell, and I keep having to wrangle this fella, and he was always a treat, as a kid. There's a scene where he's reading the newspaper and explaining the whole Blue Fur lady, the lady in white, right? Yeah. Which is, again, if you watch both of those, you see that it's staged differently. There's a shot directly on the gates of the cemetery, whereas it's a side shot in the Browning version. And both of them feature the actress kind of creeping around in white, but it's terrific stuff. And But I will say that in terms of storytelling, Lupita Tovar, at one point early on says, it's kind of during her speech where she says, when she's describing her dream, she says, that's right. She basically says something, Van Helsing says, when was the last time you dreamed this? And she said, it was the day that we buried Lucy. And that line is not said in the Browning version, which I thought was really interesting. They don't talk about Lucy until the end of the story, and you just see both Van Helsing and Harker walking out of the cemetery, and you don't know necessarily what you've done. You've got to really think about it. And so that, in many ways, that's one of the ways that I think that critics point to that and said, that's really clear storytelling. You understand Lucy's story very, very clearly. She died the next day, and she was buried, and then Mina started to see her, and then later on Van Helsing and Harker had to, do away with her, or put her at peace, at rest, as they say. But, really interesting kind of linear storytelling if you sit there and watch it carefully.
Which I think people should try to do. It's easy to get wrapped up in it, and, there's no wrong way to watch a movie. If you watch a movie, great, just enjoy yourself, but I think if you really give this movie a good hard look, it's going to reveal so much and give you so much more. I'm real curious, and I don't know. I don't speak any other language. I'm a white guy.
Okay.
You grew up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, for crying out loud.
That's pretty cool, though.
But but this is not just the only movie that was shot this way. There were other films that were shot in foreign languages or in other languages, at night or whatever. And I would love to see it.
And then the studios were like, wait a minute, why don't we just dub these things? Why don't we just dub these things? Is the decision the studio made. But while this was going on, it was pretty cool.
We're lucky to have something like this.
We should all look at this as a blessing, as we talk about a vampire movie. I agree. It's just a total, it's anything but a misfire. It's if anything, or you should look at it like a Valentine to the original Lugosi story, version. And I think that it's really, really fun. This version is fun and enjoyable, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who loves this stuff. It's just really, really terrific. And after a while, I think that you can watch it on its own. Even when I was younger, and it was funny. I should mention this in passing. The first 5 years in my career, I spent a lot of time on the Universal lot.
We talked a little bit about that the last time you were here, and I just remember thinking, oh, so lucky.
Right, and so it's really cool for me to watch the opera scene, and now think of myself as a little boy watching it, and now as kind of an older guy, and think, you know what? I actually went on that stage. It was during a pretty mediocre show called Sequest that we don't really need to talk about, but all the cool sets were surrounded by the opera set from Phantom of the Opera and that box from Dracula, because they shot that scene in that same stage that they shot the Phantom of the Opera. And I went up there, and I looked around, and I just, I spent many a lunchtime just kind of bopping around the Universal lot, the ins and outs, European streets, and seeing, the buildings with doors that wouldn't open, and or would open to 2x4s, and being told, hey, that's the Phantom stage, it's haunted by the guard. And then the director's like, look, there's possums and skunks all over the studio, dude. That's what they're running into, man. And so in a way, Derek, we talk about blessings and stuff like that when we watch this show. Truly, I'm just really grateful that as a little boy that was a monster kid that just obsessed about, whether his Aurora mummy who had his knuckles cut off matched the mummy, the knuckles in the Carice movies, and yet I was able to end up, walking around the haunted city of my dreams, and I'm just, really grateful for all that stuff, man. Truly.
See, I when you told me a little bit about this the last time, and I think about it as like, I would have gotten fired, because on day 2, I would have gotten intentionally lost on my lunch break, wandering around these sets, and never came back because I could just imagine getting lost in there.
Well,
for
it's
hours.
funny. I mean, I was pretty
Wow.
disciplined. I would do my work, and then, when I wasn't having lunch with a buddy, I would grab my lunch and I would go out to the set in a golf cart, and I would gobble my lunch, and then, I was in nirvana. I would walk around European streets, and I would go down to the Sequest stages, and everyone was like, those are the Sequest stages. And to myself, I was like, no, dude, that's the Phantom of the Opera stage, man. Like, that's where I'm at. And then just to kind of sit in the same seats that Lugosi and, Helen Chandler and Lupita Tovar, it turns out. What a gift that was. And I just, and then, 20 years later, that kid ends up writing a Dracula novel. How about that? To tie that all together, so it's been a pretty cool, thing to have happen. But more than anything, when we talked about this, right away I watched them back to back, and I was still that little kid just enjoying, that slit of light that goes across Bella's face and thinking, whoa, that's Dracula, right? Like, that's Dracula right there, and it's just terrific. And then, as you get to the end of the story and you see the differences. You see that director Meford says, okay, I'm going to have a shot of Dracula putting Eva down, and then he sees the son, so he's like, darn it, I can't kill her, so he leaves her alone, which is not in the Lugosi version, right? So there is that kind of extra layer of storytelling that you see in the Meford version that, again, we shouldn't look at it like, Monster Kid fistfight time. We should look at it like, hey, that's really cool, and, it's just a different way of telling the same story. So,
exactly.
Right? All cool stuff.
I think that's a great way to put it and a great way to sum up this part of the conversation. I'm sure people can talk about these movies back to back. Shu and I probably.
Yeah, no, I will say that the unspoken third Dracula that no one talks about that I like a lot is the 79 Dracula. And we'll leave that for another time in the universe. But that's another one that I really, really like, that people analyze in the same way that they scrutinize, in my opinion, the Arias version. And for me, it's just one big bowl of Nosferatu soup that I think everybody should enjoy. So.
Nosferatu soup.
Right.
Don't know what it tastes like, except I know it doesn't taste like garlic.
Well, maybe it tastes like Clamato. Maybe it's a Clamato thing.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know. I used to buy those. My parents used to take me to accordion lessons when I was a little kid, and I hated them. Oh my God! But there was a liquor store next door that sold these packets of bubblegum cards that were the Universal Monsters. They were the production stills. And they had these really funny little lines underneath, about, Clamato in the soup or whatever, like stuff like that we always enjoyed. But I looked forward to going to accordion lessons, not for the accordion lessons, but for the bubblegum cards with the Universal Monsters on them that I adored. So.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And I think we just came up with another movie to add to the list of movies that we're going to talk about someday, because I've never seen the 79 Dracula.
Oh,
I
man.
know. I've listened to the score. I love the soundtrack. John Williams is fantastic.
Fantastic.
But I've never seen the film.
No, I have the Shout Factory, or Scream Factory, I should say, version that came out last year. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot. It's very gothic. It's very traditional. And I think it's a really strong entry. It's in many ways, it takes the issues of the second and third act of the 31 films, I'll say, and adds some pretty creepy, cool stuff to it. Yes. It has the usual criticism that other folks have come up to describe it, and I agree. Just like I agree that there's stuff that could be analyzed in the two 1931 films, but to me, it's all good stuff. So if you buy Barnabas Collins speaking Spanish when you're a kid, you're going to buy a lot of stuff, and that's how it was for me. So
I love that. Oh man, Ricardo, this was awesome. I'm so glad we did this, and
Yeah, me too. Thank
you were
you.
able to do this so short notice.
No, my pleasure.
This is going to be going out this week, so we're definitely
really?
going to make sure people. Yeah, it's short turnaround on this one.
Okay.
So
No,
I'm excited
that's cool.
to get it.
No, I mean, you were like, hey, you want to talk Dracula? I'm like, no, of course not. I hate Dracula. Why would I want to talk about Dracula? And so then, boom, here we are. So yeah, I totally look forward to it. Certainly, I follow Monster Kid Radio on Facebook, and I enjoy all the posts. I throw a few up there myself every once in a while. So I look forward to everyone's feedback and enjoyment of this really cool stuff. Officially, when it gets to August, I feel like we're in Halloween season already. So
yeah, I agree. I think, well, I mean, it's Halloween,
right?
365 over here, but
there you go. There you go. And we,
I love it.
Yeah, and I love it when you talk Creature of the Black Lagoon with other guests, because I'm a big Creature guy. I've got like 7 or 8 of them around my studio. Love that guy. Yeah, love that
guy. I cannot get enough of Creature. People know.
Right?
I can't shut up about that movie. I love that movie.
Oh my God,
much.
the underwater photography in Creature from the Black Lagoon is the sharpest, so beautiful. And look, no disrespect to the land crew, right, everybody, but my goodness, when you're a little kid and when I watched Creature from the Black Lagoon as a little boy the first time, that was the first time that I was young enough to go, I think that's a real monster. I think that's real, because it looked, that suit is like 50 years ahead of its time. That design, that suit, the way it moved, the way it breathed. There's that shot where it's walking at you, and you see the gills opening and closing.
Oh God, he's like gasping for air.
Yeah, and that might have been one of the first times I cursed as a little boy when I saw that, and I was like, that's like the coolest thing that and Godzilla chewing on a train might have been the coolest things I saw as a little boy, mixed in with all the stuff that we talked about right now. But like I believe, I'm like, well, is Godzilla, is it real? But the Creature from the Black Lagoon, that guy was real for me. Holy smokes, that was cool stuff.
Oh man,
right?
They just showed that up here in 3D.
Holy smokes,
at the Joy Cinema. So yeah, I was there. It's the second time I've shared the movie with my girlfriend. She wanted to see it, and they showed it in 3D. So got to watch that. One of my best friends was there with me with a couple of his kids.
That's cool.
I got to introduce the movie. It was so fun.
I mean, the whole trilogy, I'm a big fan of Revenge of the Creature. Him flipping that car over.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, whoa, that's so amazing. So,
They're great.
Right?
All 3. And Creature Walks Among Us is so underrated.
I agree.
I've really warmed up to that one, too.
No, I agree. Because right away, you take what is supposed to be the antagonist, and you flip it, and suddenly you go, oh, my God, I feel sorry for this giant manfish guy. And it's a really cool story. And, also, as a kid who grew up in the 60s, looking at 1950s Florida and Los Angeles is pretty cool. Those locations are pretty awesome, And again, that photography, and I loved okay, we're getting totally off the subject here, forgive me, but the shot of the creature in the aquarium with all those fish in Revenge of the Creature is just stunning for me to watch. Always.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, so good, so great, so fantastic. Loved all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, what a pleasure it was to be here with you and talk about things that bump in the night and things that swim through the water, apparently. And, we'll do it again soon, my friend.
Oh, for sure. Well, before you go.
Yes.
Got to do a round of the Classic 5 with you, sir.
Okay, let's do it.
The Classic 5.
All right. So I got a deck of cards here. Each one of these cards has a this or that. Which movie do you prefer? Style question on them. There are no wrong answers. It's just a way to get monster kids talking or keep them talking about their favorite topic, monster movies. Ricardo, are you ready to play a round of the Classic 5?
Yes, I am, and I'm honored to play it. And also, this is kind of another occasion used to warm up the guests, but I guess I came into this already warmed up, so I'm good to go. Let's go.
We came into this hot,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go.
All right, card number 1 right off the top. What is your favorite Abbott and Costello Meet monster movie?
Meet Frankenstein is towering, okay? It's astonishing. It, above all, as John Landis once told me, he says, Ricardo, I want you to remember this. That movie respects the universal monsters, okay? And that's totally true. And yet, I do have a soft spot in my heart for Meet the Mummy. I enjoy it.
Really?
Yes, I do. But, again, Meets Frankenstein is just one of the 10 poles of my childhood. It's a worthy conclusion to all the beautiful stuff in the 30s and 40s. And I love it. Flat out love it. Because that's within all of that, you get the mini scene of Dracula versus the Wolfman, right? Or the Wolfman meets Dracula. You got to see that. So, love it. Love it. And, there's the young lady from Cat People as well. So it's a terrific picture. Yes. And Lon Chaney Jr. and Lou Costello should have gone on tour after that movie because they were natural. They were incredible. The line that Lou says about you and a million other guys, that's like Casablanca with the gambling joke. That just never stops being funny. It's terrific. I don't know if I even answered your question, but Meets Frankenstein is my choice. That's my favorite.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
Come on, take it all out.
Now! Look out, Chick! Cover up! Samantha, cover up! Wait a minute.
The nation's top comics, Abbott and Costello. Petrified, but hilariously. Plus the dangerous and terrifying Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney. Plus that fiend out of a nightmare, the vampire Batman, Count Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi. Plus the most dreaded creature of them all, the Frankenstein monster, played by Glenn Strange. Plus a couple of luscious but designing females in the spookiest laugh fest on record.
Frankenstein's great. Mummy's great. I'm a big fan of The Invisible Man.
There it is as well. That's a good one. Again, we can't argue with that one. Okay.
All right, card number 2. If you could swap places with any character from a classic monster movie, who would it be?
Well, if you're the creature from the Black Lagoon, you get to swim around and do whatever you want until the crew shows up to harpoon you and do awful stuff to you. If you're, Larry Talbot, you're okay until you show up into that one town. As a little boy, the creature and the Wolfman were my favorites, and I would have to stick with one of those two, the Wolfman winning by a nose. I love the Wolfman.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great film.
Yeah.
It's a great film.
Yes.
All right, card number 3. Alfred Hitchcock or William Castle?
Oh, wow. That's a proverbial arm behind the back, but I do love Hitchcock, The Birds. The Birds is terrific.
So
it's
good.
A tremendous picture. It's a tremendous picture. Okay. But Bill Castle, sir, I salute you from afar.
Yeah, I just started. I've been meaning to read it, and it's been on my shelf forever. I just started reading his autobiography.
Ooh, really?
The William Castle autobiography.
Okay.
I'm going to Step Right Up, I think is what it's called.
Okay, I'm going to have to
But yeah.
hunt that one down. Thank you.
All right, card number 4. Son of Kong or Son of Godzilla?
Son of Kong has dinosaurs in it. So it wins by a nose as well. Although I do love Son of Godzilla. Son of Kong is not his father's Kong, if you will, but I just have never-ending love for the O'Brien stop-motion Skull Island stuff. It's just wonderful. It's a world that I, as a little boy, again, we could talk about King Kong for 2 or 3 hours, dude, and just like my obsession with that island, that technique. Himself, I remember being a little boy and watching those movies and seeing a guy named Delgado in the screen. I'm not related. Marcel is Mexican and I'm Costa Rican, but holy smokes, just seminal choice. Son of Kong.
Skipper, believe it or not, there's a little Kong. What?
A little... How little?
Tarantula or the Deadly Mantis?
Oh, Tarantula. I apologize for hesitating. I shouldn't have hesitated. As soon as you said Tarantula, I should have said Tarantula before you said the second choice. Although I did have some model kits as a kid of like giant insects attacking cities, and I got the Black Scorpion one. But yeah, Tarantula is pretty amazing. It's the only one where I thought, okay, Black Scorpion had stop motion, but that tarantula looks pretty darn real. Loved it. Tarantula is my choice. Absolutely. So there you go.
Excellent.
But what if circumstances were to magnify one of them in size and strength, took it out of its primitive world and turned it loose in ours? Then expect something that's fiercer, more cruel and deadly than anything that ever walked the earth.
Even science was stunned. The new atomic miracle should have been mankind's greatest boon. Instead, when such power to cause phenomenal growth proved dangerously unstable, man was confronted with his most shocking blunder.
The isotope triggered our nutrient into a nightmare.
A blunder that transformed a tiny insect into the 100-foot spider that was now ravaging the panic-stricken countryside.
It's been awesome chatting with you. Listeners, please check out Dracula of Transylvania and what Ricardo's up to. And I've got the new book coming out later this year. As soon as we know more, I'll make sure that if I talk about it here on the show. Thank you for doing this. And let's not wait so long. And next time I say let's talk about this, let's not wait forever to actually talk about a movie on the show.
I know. We talked about, Kolchak the Night Stalker. We even... talk about Island of the Lost Souls, which in my opinion is the best horror movie of the 1930s for many horrifying reasons, which we can get out our lightsabers and, have a friendly duel about. But never a wrong time to talk about monsters with me, and it certainly sounds like you feel the same way. So truly...
It's a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you, good sir. I certainly appreciate it, and my best to all the monster kids out there. Thank you for all what you do.
All right, gang, thanks for listening. Here we are at the end of the show where I tell you that I appreciate you for being part of the Monster Kid Radio experience by listening to the show, hopefully sharing posts about the show, sharing your love of the podcast with everybody else. We can get more listeners and just make the Monster Kid Radio community the Monster Kid Radio heads, whatever y'all want to call yourselves, the irregulars. Just spread the word. I appreciate all the shares and the tweets and the reposts and everything else. You can find us online, various social media outlets. Facebook has a Facebook page and Facebook group. We have a Twitter, a Reddit, a Discord, and a Patreon. Please consider joining, liking, retweeting, sharing, posting, patronizing, discording, becoming a patron, liking, subscribing, whatever it is you're supposed to do online. Just please consider doing that. You can find everything you need to know about Monster Kid Radio over at monsterkidradio.net in the show notes. You're going to find links to everything that we've talked about here. We're going to find links to Ricardo's book. Please consider using the Amazon affiliate link when you do that because it helps us out a little bit. Also put a link to that Cinemassacre video that I was mentioning about the cardboard in Dracula. It's going to put a link to that as well. So go check that out. And you'll see a note there announcing what's coming up next week on the show.
How much Jack do you think's in that strong rock?
There's plenty of Cuban sugar, though.
Here's what happened. The general beat his friend Castro to the Cuban treasury. The strongbox is now on this boat. So are a deported American gangster and his moll. And lurking in the depths is the creature from the haunted sea.
You're a crazy mixed-up kid. I am perfectly adjusted to my life of crime.
Don't worry, Mary Bell. I'll save you.
It's all right. Be calm, everybody. The boat's insured.
Talking about Creature from the Haunted Sea with Go Forth and Games' Tom Gurganus. Come back for that in 7 days. If you have any feedback for the show about what we talked about this week, previous episodes, or what we're going to be talking about next week, please consider dropping us a line as well. You can email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484. That, of course, is over at the website as well. All right, that's it. Let's go ahead and get out of here so I can get the episode uploaded and send you on your way. Thanks again for listening. Remember, Monster Kid Radio is a registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio, LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio, LLC is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 unported license. Of course, that doesn't apply to the song Moon Surfing. That is copyright 2022. The band is Wave Electric. You can find them over at waveelectric.bandcamp.com and check out their album, self-titled debut LP. Let them know that you heard about them here on MKR. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.